You're listening to the Middle Cut Podcast. Irish whiskey in conversation. Brought to you by Potstilled.com, your one-stop shop for Irish whiskey news and interviews. Now, it's time for your hosts.
Hello, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Middle Cut Podcast. As always, I am Matt Healy from Potstilled.com, also known as Potstilled Matt. And with me, I am delighted to have, once again, Mr. Matt Jones. How are you doing, sir? Welcome back to the show.
I'm very good this evening. How are you doing?
You know what? It's rainy and horrible, and it was snowing this morning, so I am delighted to be inside with both yourself online and also a few glasses of whiskey that we have lined up for this evening as well. As always, the Middle Cut Podcast is sponsored by Irish Malts. A very big thank you to them who make this show possible. They are a fantastic one-stop shop for all things Irish whiskey, gin and poutines, and they will deliver straight to your door wherever you are around the world, of course, where legal. Middle Cut brought to you by Potstill.com. That is my website, my handle. Everyone out there either listening or watching on YouTube, a very big welcome. It's your first time. This is Irish Whiskey in Conversation. Matt and myself sit down and talk about the world of Irish whiskey as it is today. Matt, why don't you give us a little intro to yourself for those who don't know you at this point?
I'm Matt. I'm the whiskey nerd, known on Instagram and YouTube. I review whiskeys, focusing on Irish whiskeys, and I tend to make whiskey cocktails as well, because I always feel that whiskey is one of those things that it has this kind of barrier to entry that shouldn't be there. So it's fun to use, it's fun to drink, but if you have it in a cocktail and you can really enjoy it, whatever way you like to drink your whiskey is how you should drink it. So I like kind of promoting Irish whiskey and whiskey cocktails.
What is the most recent cocktail that you've had in the glass?
Oh, I made an apple sour. So I took Granny Smith apples, took the juice out of them and the peels, and then made a whiskey sour using the juice of the Granny Smith apples. Came out lovely and green. It came out just fantastic. And that, I think, video will be coming out soon. So that's a very tasty one. So
check out the YouTube page for that one. Do you give the recipes as well, or do you just do them before and after?
So I make them live on camera and everything. So it's good because sometimes I make a mistake. I'll drop something on camera, have a bit of a blooper there sometimes. Usually I don't really make a mistake, but I've made a few. It's kind of fun. And then it's just kind of good to show off like what you can do with Irish whiskey and the ingredients you use. You don't have to get crazy expensive things. You don't have to get really complex stuff. You can really make some fantastic drinks with some limited range of ingredients.
How much is a Granny Smith put in your back these days?
About 50 cents. I think it's getting tight.
That's a tough cocktail. That's a €9 cocktail if you're in a bar right there.
Oh yeah.
What was your base whiskey for it?
That one I use Rowan Co. I tend to use Rowan Co. when it comes to cocktails because it's not going to be something that's overpowering for a cocktail. Mm-hmm. It's not going to like overpower the other ingredients you have in a recipe, but it still comes in at 45%. So even when you have the ice and you dilute it down, you're not kind of losing too much flavor. You're not losing too much. Plus, it's nice and sweet and caramelly. But I have made a couple of ones recently where I use like rye whiskey, where I use something to get a bit of extra bite. I recorded one recent enough with the Powers Rye, where I made an Irish Manhattan. Powers Rye, it's nice, it's new enough. Came out, the Powers Rye is much softer than like American ryes. So because of that,
marketing, he must be wetting themselves over you making cocktail.
Yeah. So it was I made an Irish Manhattan, but so normally in Manhattan you use like red vermouth, it's quite spicy and harsh. But because the Powers Rye comes through a bit sweeter, a bit softer than American whiskies, I use a different type of vermouth. Just same ones you can get at most grocery stores, but just kind of softer to match up with the whiskey and match its flavors.
Okay. And how did it come out?
Came out really well. I tried a few. I enjoy, because what I do off camera is I generally make the cocktail 1 or 2 times, maybe 3 or 4, to kind of get the recipe down, to kind of go, do I want to go in with 30 ml, 20 ml? What kind of ingredients I want to use? So I make the cocktail off camera a few times to kind of get the hang of it. And I enjoyed making the Rye Manhattan a few times.
Have you had a cocktail that just didn't make it to cut?
There was one I tried. I tried smoking a cocktail with like rosemary. You know, so some people, they'll use rosemary and they'll smoke it and pop it into like a cocktail mixer. And it just came out really harsh, really bitter. And I was like, I can't really make this. Can't try it out. A couple other recipes I've tried with poutines. Tried using like mead. Tried using PX sherry in 1 or 2 ones. Just kind of didn't work well with a cocktail. But I enjoy tooling around with the recipes, as does my wife. If you're familiar with her, she might be Rose, the whiskey noob. She's kind of exploring whiskey through me, through my collection, and she enjoys trying the cocktails and telling me, oh, this should be sweeter, that should be more sour. So yeah.
Is she kind of your litmus test then at that point? If she's herself as the whiskey noob, she's I mean, we talk about I talk about this on occasion, but in the world of Irish whiskey, we all are in a bubble and we think that we're very exciting and we're the top of the world and whatnot. But the majority of whiskey consumers don't know a blend from a pot still, and having a litmus test of a kind of a true consumer must be very useful for your cocktails, because it's not, we might love a really big, heavy, pot still spice cocktail, but if the general consumer doesn't, then it's probably not going to have much saleability.
So something like a Boulevardier, which is quite bitter, quite dry, quite like herbal. I kind of like it. I kind of like it, but Rose does not like that kind of drink. She's like, oh, throw a bit of sugar in there. So it is definitely good to kind of say, oh, what is a drink that people are going to like? What's the drink that people are going to enjoy? And yeah, so it's very handy to have her there, bouncing the recipe off her a couple of times. I tried making a peanut butter and jelly one that'll be coming out eventually. I had a thing, I had like 10 different recipes of it. I was adding salt to the shaker to try and get like the peanut butter thing. It came out in the end eventually, but there were definitely a few ones. She was like, took a sip, like, no, not drinking that. Get rid of it.
That's very fair. I've had experiences where in a past life, about 10 years ago, I was a cocktail bartender for about a year. But I've forgotten a lot of those skills. And I know Chris Hennessy then at the time, Dillon Whiskey Bar in Kilkenny, a very, very skilled bartender, cocktail bartender and flair tender. He made me a cocktail that was a flip. So it used the egg yolk in the cocktail. And it was delicious when he made it. And I got him to send me the recipe. And I made it, and it was one of the most repugnant cocktails. It was one of the very few that I have just instantly. I think I handed it to someone else. I was like, maybe I'm just off for some reason, and they nearly got sick with the cocktail. So yeah, so that's a skilled hand versus an unskilled hand making the same cocktail, because he gave me the whole recipe. I was just making it.
You're just making it wrong.
Exactly, or just not well at all. But we're sitting down this evening. We're doing it virtually this time, but we do have some whiskeys that we're imbibing upon this evening. What have you got that you're sitting down to?
I've got Sailor's Home. This is new enough of a release. It's from Sailor's Home whiskey. So this is the Storm Chaser whiskey. I'm going to pop that there. This is kind of what I reviewed it a while back. It's very nice. It's a single malt whiskey. They've aged it in 4 different types of casks. Quite nice. But I quite like this one because I'm in the Irish Whiskey Society, and our former president, Mr. Jack O'Shea, very closely connected to the Sailor's Home brand. And he was very liberal with samples of this while it was still kind of a secret whiskey. While it won a few awards before it was even released. He was just like, here, try this, here, try that. And at the Whiskey Live Dublin last year, he was handing out samples by the new time, and it was very good to see how proud he was of the whiskey he had made. And so I'm kind of having a dram of that. What about yourself?
I have a new bottle to my collection. This is Garden County whiskey from Rathnew. Excuse me. Father Son Enterprise. Actually, a new one to me. I hadn't seen or heard much about it, and then just kind of shot across my bow. It says Father Son Enterprise, and it was funny for me because I hadn't heard about it. It's Source Liquid at the moment. I think they're going to have about 4 SKUs launching very soon. But what's I suppose unusual is by the time I had heard about it, they have stills in situ, which is unusual. Usually, it's like, oh, we've a distillery around the way. The stills are ordered. We're tearing down walls or whatever. They've stills in house that are being plumbed and then will be commissioned eventually. But I know they've got that. This is their single pot still, I believe. Yes, it is indeed. Ex-bourbon and virgin American oak. So I had a sample of this. I actually had a sample of this last night. It was my first kind of tasting sample. Now I've got a lovely tumbler that used to have ice in it. It has since dissolved. So come at me, purists. I'm sitting
one moment. Just
oh, Oh yeah, that was okay. That's the Sailor's Home. We're gonna have to do the pop test on the Garden County. Give me a second here.
Oh, that's nice. That's right.
Petite. It is, but I like it. All right,
Yeah.
one more from the Sailor's Home there, just to get a comparison. Yeah, it's interesting. This proves nothing, but it has become a feature on the show. we do the
pop test. Yeah, Garden County are interesting. I've been following them on Instagram, like kind of the progress, because they're putting out good videos of them installing their stills and everything. It's really cool to see like the passion behind it and how quickly they're putting things together. Because I know a few other distilleries that have been, well, they're not really distilleries yet. They haven't been distilling whiskey, but it takes them a lot longer. Whereas they were just like, okay, let's light a fire under ourselves and let's get going. And it's kind of cool to see how quickly they're moving.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things, actually, I know they made gin previously in Newtown Mount Kennedy, and that operation kind of ceased at some point throughout kind of the COVID pandemic, and they've now moved space. But for me, I think this is going to be this is not going to work on if you're listening on podcasts. I apologize. I'm holding up a bottle currently. I think the packaging on this for first out the gate offering is really, really good quality. I think they've done a really fantastic job on this. I have seen over the last 10 years in Irish whiskey a lot of first out the gate packaging that lasts for maybe 6 months to 2 years max and gets refreshed really quickly as the brand kind of gets its feet and launches, and maybe hasn't kind of, they set it up at the time and they thought it was best foot forward, and then as they go on, they learn that it maybe doesn't suit their brand as it's growing. I think this is a fantastic bottle in terms of packaging. It actually has a gift tin here as well. Also, well, it's nice and foiled, which I liked. A hot foil press on it. And it has, the satisfying pop on it too. But I mean, as a first out the gate for even gifting, these add a bit, or I suppose I take off a bit of the margin. So it is nice to see in terms of someone putting best foot forward. So that's why I've chosen tonight.
Okay, it's a good choice to be had. I mean, it is interesting, like the packaging, as you mentioned. Like I know. There's one brand, the name, I think it's Aaron Whiskey, EI or INN. Very hard to find, very small amounts of whiskey, but the guy kind of behind it, he cut down a tree, an Irish oak tree, for health and safety reasons, and he aged his whiskey in the. You would probably remember this story. It was on it was a 3 grams, wasn't it? Where he shared the story.
It wasn't 3 grams. That's not why I'm laughing. I just like that you clarified. You're like, for health and safety reasons, he cut down that tree.
He didn't just
It was legal. They are protected. He didn't just go down felling trees, but yeah.
Yeah, so he cut down the tree, used the wood to make the barrel, which he then finished the whiskey in. And then he's like, okay, I'm going to launch this whiskey as soon as I can make the packaging, because he's going to use the wood from the tree to actually, to make the box for the whiskey. And he's like, oh yeah, I'm delaying the launch of the whiskey because I want the packaging right, because it is a package deal, I guess. If you want that good premium expression, you have that kind of premium feel, especially for gifting.
Yeah, and again, it comes down a lot to what we were saying a moment ago, that the consumer, the end consumer that aren't nerds like yourself and myself, they don't, as I said, most people don't know what the difference between a postel and a blend and a malt or whatever. When you get onto the shelf as a salesperson, getting onto the shelf is very much half of the process. You think, you're a brand producer, you get an importer in a country, and the importer maybe is a distributor or maybe sells to a distributor, and then the distributor has sales teams and they go out and then they start selling to all the independents and maybe some of the multiples and whatnot. And you think, great, the distributor sold 300, 3,000, 30,000 cases, whatever it might be. They still have to be bought off the shelf. I've met a lot of liquor store owners and stuff over the years that will always say, why would my customers pick up your bottle next to Jameson or Tullamore Dew or Ardbeg or Lagavulin? What's the thing? And that's the thing, is the packaging is the first touch point. And if you don't, in today's world, I get a lot of feedback internationally that consumers are buying local a lot, but it doesn't impact Irish whiskey as much because you can't, or like bourbon or Scotch, because if you're in Australia, you can't make Scotch. But they want to make sure, or they want to feel like your brand isn't a faceless brand.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. They want the touch and feel. They don't want to think that it's made in a enormous factory in, you know, Belarus or wherever it might be, that it's just a nameless brand of one of a million kind of thing. And I see a lot more brands putting the kind of more personal touch and feel on the packaging as well, which is interesting these days. And I suppose even for yourself, if you were picking up vermouths and whatnot of different brands, it's nice when you have something that you think is well made and handmade, you know.
Yeah, I mean, West Cork, I think they do some kind of basic entry level whiskies, but their packaging it stands out. It's a basic enough capsule, like the bottle itself, basic enough shape, but it has like the map of Cork actually on the label. The label is cut out to be the map of Cork and has the signatures of, not hand signed, but like the actual printed signatures of the three founders of it on it, and it just makes that whiskey that little bit more personal, makes it that little bit more of a story behind it. Like, oh, Jameson, we all know Jameson, but it is a giant corporation. It's like a Starbucks of whiskey, but you get something else that's like, oh, this is also nice, but it's a bit more personable, a bit more kind of unique. It definitely stands out.
Well, in terms of bringing people, I suppose, into the folds of whiskey, you mentioned the Irish Whiskey Society, and I know that there's a lot of whiskey societies around the country, that someone we've touched on before, that do, you know, monthly tastings, whatever it might be. I thought it was a fun twist, since you are so involved in the Irish Whiskey Society, for people out in the world, you know, where they're not near the big chapters like Cork, Dublin, Dingle, you know, even the Louth Whiskey Society is doing great work, Carlow Whiskey Society. If people were, you know, say in Wicklow or in wherever it might be, and they want to set up their own whiskey society or tasting group, be it in an association with a pub or in their own homes, what advice would you give people who wanted to set up their own kind of like-minded whiskey tasting society?
Start small. I mean, it's all well and good to have lofty goals to try and think, oh, we're going to go for 100 members in a year. But no, starting small gets you that core of people who are not just into the idea of the whiskey, but they're into the idea of the society. So even if it's only 5 or 10 people who are really into it, and you make yourself a little like tasting group, even if it's just on WhatsApp, and then it can grow organically because you got people who are really interested in it, rather than trying to grow too fast, and you end up with something where you got like those 5 people who are really into it, maybe 95 not hangers on, but people who aren't as into it, and then the 5 passionate people, they kind of lose the passion a little bit. They lose the kind of the desire to do things. Like in the Whiskey Society, it definitely started small, but we have a crew of about 10 of us who do the events, and we're all volunteers. We're all just volunteers, but the perk we get is that we get to decide on what the tastings are. So it's still a little bit of like a passion project for all of us, because one guy, he really wanted to do the Six Nations tasting, where we got whiskies from each of the 6 nations, paired them up against each other, because he thought that was a really fun idea. It turned out to be a fantastic event, but again, it's about the passion of the people who are actually into it. So I'd say start small, even if it's just like a bottle share program with you and your mates. You find out, okay, let's say 5 or 6 of us, cool, even 10 of us, let's get a bottle of whiskey, 700 ml. That's 2 good shots, 2 good measures out of it. And then you just say, let's do a bottle share program where we each get a measure to taste at a little event, and then we each get a measure to take home and kind of enjoy later on. And then it grows and it grows and it grows like that. And you can set up tastings and comparative tastings and things like that. And it kind of grows naturally, I think, as opposed to if you try and force it, you try and grow too fast. It doesn't kind of, I've seen a few kind of people try something like that. It doesn't really last, but I've seen a few other people just kind of, let's say, okay, let's just take it easy. Let's just let it grow. And like people keep excited about it, and then it just grows. So I say that start small, start with a few people who are like really into it, and then they'll form the core, and then they'll help it grow.
And would you do it in somebody's home, or would you look to go and work with a bar or whatnot? Or I mean, there's lots of different options, but for you personally, if you're in the middle of wherever in the country, you don't have access to the big chapters.
In the middle of nowhere, I'd say a pub. If you're in the middle of nowhere, I'd say aim for a pub or something like that, because I would never encourage drinking and driving. So if it's much easier to get a taxi home, obviously, if you're at a pub. But if you're kind of just somewhere you're away, you're in, like, let's say a city where it doesn't have a whiskey society or doesn't have a proper big chapter or something like that, I'd say someone's home is always fun. You can get a bit of food and you can make it into more of a social evening, and then you build that crew where it's not just show up, taste some whiskey, and leave, where you get people who are really excited about it, make that core of friends, and then that is your society. Because at the end of the day, it might be a whiskey society, but it's still a society. It's still about people who like each other, people who like spending time with each other, and people who enjoy drinking whiskey together. So the whiskey is almost half of the importance of the society. You need to have the people you like. So I'd say if you can do it in someone's home, you can make it kind of like fun, even like a book club. Like book clubs rotate between people's homes.
Yeah. It's the I mean, I'm going to make a joke about it, but that's actually probably a really good comparison. Back in I think 2012, while I was in college, I made a version of that, a whiskey tasting group with mates of mine from college and from home, and there's probably about 7 of us, and we would chip in. And we would buy. It would always. We wouldn't meet. We'd rotate homes. It was in my house a lot, and a buddy of mine kind of had just bigger spaces. We were living with our parents, and whatever. And we bought 4 bottles at a time, and that was what we'd all chip in. I don't know, 40 quid or something. It would be the 4 bottles. It'd be pick a theme. We would wear suits, and we would smoke cigars, and we called ourselves the Whiskey Wankers. And the idea was just that it was we were there to learn about the whiskey, but we'd seen a lot of kind of the like whiskey clubs online, and it was all very kind of at that like 2012. It was very kind of pretentious, and we thought that was really funny and kind of strange. So that's why we named ourselves that. And then the suits were like a kind of an ironic thing. Well, funnily enough, I actually was going through my cupboard there the other day, and I still have the original 4 bottles that we did. I don't have any of the subsequent ones, but we didn't really. You're right.
Yeah,
you're knocking things over. But yeah, I'm not so sure how great the whiskey tastes now, but I still have 4 of the original bottles.
Oh, they've been open for years.
Oh, they've been half filled for 10 years, 11 years. I don't know why I still have them.
But that's kind of goes back to what I was saying. But like, it's for you, the memory of those bottles, the memory of drinking them with your mates, is kind of the thing that is why you kept them, and so that's why you had the fun with. Yeah.
Definitely didn't keep any cigar. I don't smoke. Wait, I would buy the smallest. I was like, what can I smoke the fastest with the least flavor? They're like, we got you, don't worry, here's that one. And then my buddies would all get something nice and fancy and whatnot. But yeah, I mean, it is a fun concept to be able to run with. In terms of the Irish Whiskey Society, do you see a lot of new people coming into the world of whiskey, or is it more so people who are used to the industry?
It's actually, I would say there's definitely almost like 2 cohorts of people. There's definitely people who are used to it. There's definitely, we've got some members who are like, they're the I don't know how to describe, they're the brewery scientists for Diageo. So when we have a sommelier in who talks about wine, he's like, tell me about the yeast, the specific yeast that was, because that's his life, as his world. He did the brewery science. And then we got people who like join maybe more recently, or they're more just passionate about a few brands of whiskey, and they're very interested in learning. So we got kind of almost 2 sides of the coin. But what I will say is everyone is kind of united by that love of whiskey. There's no one who's like, you have a brand ambassador, let's say, or you have someone who comes in and says whiskey is made from malted barley, and you have this, and everyone's heard it 100 times before. But then because there's always going to be a few new people there who haven't heard it or want to hear the specific story behind the distillery, no one's ever like going, shut up and get to the whiskey. There's definitely a friendly environment to it. So there are a lot of new people, but because everyone's always sharing information, everyone's always sharing ideas, those new people don't really stay new forever. They quickly pick up and they're like, oh, that's what that means. Oh, that's a type of still means. Oh, God, and they learn it.
I mean, there's a lot of jargon that goes on in the industry. Even at the beginning, I said there was a number of SKUs. There's 4 SKUs from Garden County. That SKU literally means stock keeping unit. Like as far as jargon goes, that's what it is.
I thought you meant skew as in like it skewed off. So it's like, oh, they've got one type of whiskey with 4 different. I was like, okay,
literally just had to refer to things like going, Anyway, fantastic amount of jargon. But where we'll find probably jargon free is in these tastings with the brand ambassadors. At least as a former brand ambassador, I would always like to think that I was jargon free, but it's not always easy to switch off that part of the brain. But one place over the weekend, I was down in Wexford town, the lovely Wexford town, and it was certainly a jargon-free event because I was down at the Southeast Whiskey Festival that you were supposed to be at, and you didn't come.
I was supposed to go. Something came up, and I was all set for a few of the masterclass because it was such a cool idea. Because I like Wexford town. I have a few mates who live down there, so I'd visit them a few times a year. And then I was like, oh, it's a great idea. It's not a festival in an area; it's set across a few different pubs, so you'd explore the town. I was like, that'd be a great. And then something came up, and I wasn't able to get down and come back in time, so I had to give it a miss, unfortunately.
Yeah, it was cool. It was across, I think, 4 or 5 pubs. It was organized by Dahi O'Connell from WD O'Connell Whiskey Merchants and Michael Cowman, Lord of the Last Drop, a personality known to most people.
I was stalking your Instagram. Don't worry, I was living vicariously through you. I was like, oh, I wish I was there.
It was funny because I was emceeing, so I wasn't presenting anything. I was just asked to kind of make sure that everything was set up correctly, and then no riots happened or people stole things, and nothing like that happened. So it was great. What was cool about the festival was that the festival was centered around own distilled spirits. And that was kind of what it made it different in that sense, that there was no source spirits. You could bring, I think it was a minimum of, you had to have 4 whiskeys, and then you could have 1 new make. So there was a lot of distilleries who you would be you would recognize. There was Slane, there was Powerscourt, there was Clonakilty, there was Teeling, but everything that was there was made by the distillery, which was quite cool. And a lot of kind of warehouse cast samples at it as well, which was very interesting. It was intimate. It was probably about, I think the smallest event was 24 people, and then the largest, I think the largest was Cologne, but I think they were expecting 28 people, and I think 40 people ended up buying tickets like last minute. I don't know, or showed up. I'm not really sure, but I got the text and was like, there's an enormous amount of people at Cologne, and I just texted, I was like, I really hope they brought enough bottles.
Cologne is one brand that does bring a crowd. The Cologne cult is real.
Yeah, it's real. It is on Facebook also as a Facebook group, but it is real. But I found it interesting that I was emceeing. There was a 1 o'clock tasting, a 4 o'clock tasting, and an 8 o'clock tasting, and that was on the Saturday. There were also tastings on the Friday. But I had 2 tastings. I had Teeling tasting at 4, and then a Powerscourt at 8. And what I found really interesting was in my 4 o'clock, there was this group of 4 lads, probably 30 there, 30 each of them. And they were a bit rambunctious or whatever. They were but they were having a great time. So I discovered about halfway through the tasting, because every time one of the guys from Teeling kept offering to the crowd, does anyone have any tasting notes? What do you smell? One of them would be vanilla, the other one would be apple, one would be Christmas cake, but they just could rotate those 3 tasting notes. And then about halfway through, we discovered that they had been at a previous tasting with Barry Chandler of Stories and Sips, and he had announced to the room that any whiskey you can get away with saying vanilla, apple, and Christmas cake, and or I think honey was the other one. And that he volunteered this to the room. You can get away with it for anything in Irish whiskey, and that was what these lads had picked up on. But about halfway through my tasting, these were 4 guys in their 30s from Wexford, had no background or experience in Irish whiskey, which was great for the festival that they're bringing in people new to the industry. But at the first tasting they were at, apparently they were at an 8-seater table with 4 people. I don't know if they had kind of boxed out seats or whatever, but there were essentially double samples for these guys, of which they happily imbibed. They came to the tasting I was emceeing. They had their allocated samplings, and they're about halfway through. One of the lads just looks at me. He was like, I think I've had 12 whiskeys today. like, they're small samples, but like, yeah, if you're not,
They add up.
like,
They add up.
yeah, they add up. Like, you should, have a good dinner. Take a pause. Like, don't feel like you have to finish everything. And they were like, the lads looked at me and they went, "We're booked into the 8 p.m. tasting too." And I was like, "You went from," and I said to them, I was like, "Have you ever drank whiskey before? Is this new?" They were like, "No, we've never drank whiskey before." And I'm like, "You went from not drinking whiskey to buying a full day pass to every tasting you could go to." I saw them on the main street in Wexford.
Were they still standing, or were they?
I actually only saw 2 of them, so I don't know, but no, I think they were fine. But I asked them how they were after that, and they said they had a phenomenal time. I'm not sure what tasting they ended up at for the last one, but I know that they were very adamant that they were heading for a big dinner after my tasting, which was clever on everyone's behalf. But I thought that was interesting that there was the excitement around it, that these 3 lads went off, or these 4 guys went off and bought 3 tasting tickets in a row. Very ambitious, mind you.
Yeah.
But I thought it was cool to see for the festival to bring those people in. That was a lot of fun.
Myself and my wife, we hosted like a whiskey cocktail evening in our house for a few of our friends who had never really tried whiskey before. And I think I may mention this last time we were talking, that we're having a few of them over, and it's like introducing people to whiskey. So I got 3 different whiskeys and I made 3 different cocktails with the 3 different whiskeys, kind of featuring like the way you can use them. Started off with a spicy passion fruit kind of margarita thing. It was a massive hit with whiskey. I know, mad, but it turned out to be really, really nice. And a couple of the drinks there throughout the night. And then over the course of the evening, Rose is like, you should come to some of the festivals. You should come to like Whiskey Live Dublin. It's pretty good. It's pretty beginner friendly. There's 100 stalls. Everyone's really friendly. And then they were all, after cocktail number 2, they went, okay, we buy tickets. So there's going to be 5 women, and Rose will be like kind of leading them around, just marching between each stall going, what do you have that's beginner friendly? And these women don't really drink whiskey, and they're all just going to be showing up. They do now. And they actually were asking me, like, send me the recipe for that, send me the recipe for this, what whiskey was that, what would you recommend? It was really good to see them kind of get into it, and they're showing up to Whiskey Live Dublin on the evening session of the Saturday, so it'll be it'll be a rambunctious session, and they're all just looking forward to just kind of marching along and seeing the old lads there who are like, oh yes, what is this whiskey? And tell me about this. And they walk up and be like, hi, we're new. What have you got?
Oh.
Yes.
Showcase. Yeah. I brought four friends to last Saturday evening session of Whiskey Live who were also new to the war. They might have, enjoy a glass of whiskey, or they actually now all send me their Irish coffees. And they go out like every week and get an Irish coffee, and they like send me the ratings, which I love. This is my favorite thing. They're rating them across the country for me. But yeah, so I actually got I'm walking through all the the thoroughfares between all the stands or whatever with these 4 people who were new to the world of whiskey. And John Teeling grabbed me and asked me a question. And then I was like, oh, John, let me introduce my friends. And then he, as John does, kind of pontificated to them about, and he filled all their glasses and he told stories or whatever. But things, he was in front of his stand to maybe a couple of meters in front of it in the middle of the passage, because people keep stopping him, and he's obviously very famous and whatnot. And anyway, we took up about 15 minutes of his time, him just telling us nothing G&D related, just kind of talking about whiskey. And he was like, what do you guys do? And one was an engineer for a pharmaceutical company, and he started talking about pharmaceuticals for a while and all this. But we left, and like one of the guys calls me and he's like, who the fuck was that? I was like that
John Teeling.
He's he's a pretty big deal. I don't really know how to. I did see. I was at a whiskey distillery opening once back in 2015, and he was described as the grandfather of Irish whiskey, to which he took no happiness out of.
No.
He's looked at me and he goes, I could have been the godfather. I mean, why? I don't know why I don't have to be the grandfather of Irish whiskey. But no, pretty big deal. Pretty big deal.
Yeah, he's just such an amiable guy. Like I think every now and then he'll actually just walk into his Teeling distillery, and he'll just walk up to a tour and be like, go to the tour guide and say, "I'll have this one," and he'll just give them the tour. I've seen it happen a couple of times. He's just like, "Oh yeah, I'll do this, and we'll talk about whiskey," and he'll just rattle off information about the business, information about global markets, just that he knows, but then also knows like the back end of the whiskey side. So he's just a really good guy.
Yeah, no, he's a very interesting person to talk to. And talking about the global markets, we are on the run up to St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And obviously St. Patrick's Day is giant across the world. And one thing I don't know if you'll know from the business side of whiskey, St. Patrick's Day usually coincides with, but not this year, a very large business-to-business trade show, the largest in the world, called Provine. And it's in Dusseldorf every year in the Messe in Dusseldorf. And it's pretty much all alcohol, mainly wine, just because the wine world's enormous. And then Scotch, Irish, tequila, whatever else. But there's I think there's 18 event halls. So imagine 18 Whiskey Lives. And maybe, the full size of the RDS is one hall. But that is in Dusseldorf, the 19th, 20th, and 21st of March. And Bord Bia created this phenomenal thing called the Ireland Pavilion. So everyone else is Moldovan wines, and you've got some random Scotch whiskies over here, and people are dotted around their brands in just one space. Whereas Ireland has this enormous build out, this I don't even know, there might be, I think this year there's going to be 25. It's the biggest year yet. There's going to be about 30 maybe brands at it, but they build out these pods, these 4x4, and then a 5x2, and then another 4x4 pods, and the whole thing is an enormous Bord Bia Ireland banner above it. Excuse me. And brands come and they set up this festival, this setup, and they get kind of your own office booth. It's very cool. And you showcase your brand to people from around the world. Now it's all business to business, so this is the time that the sales managers and the owners of these distilleries will organize meetings with all their current customers, because every distributor and importer worth their salt is at Provine. It's the biggest thing since sliced bread. People will come from Japan, South Korea, they'll come from China. Now they do have versions in that side of the world, but this is the easiest way to meet kind of everyone. People will come from Total Wine and More in the States, Specs, Binny's, all the big chains. And you will meet new customers, old customers, everything in between. And it's 3 days of just relentless brand pitches, meeting, shaking hands. And you will get, before COVID, you used to get an enormous amount of tire kickers, but COVID kind of dulled that down a lot. But now what I say is the new tire kickers is Russians who can't get any goods in Russia anymore. And while you get people would just walk up and be like, I will buy 1 million bottles right now, 1 million bottles if you sell me to Russia now. And you're like, no. It's joke's on you. I don't have 1 million bottles of Irish whiskey. But yeah, so there's a lot of that that goes on. But it's a great place to showcase of Irish whiskey. And the Ireland stand, it's called a pavilion. It's called the Ireland Pavilion.
Oh, the Irish tourism industry, the Irish machine. We're very good at promoting Irish stuff. I think with Bord Bia, with Fáilte Ireland. Hell, in Ireland, if you're listening from outside of Ireland, chances are, if you're listening around St. Patrick's Day, there's an Irish member of government in your country, because we just ship all of our ministers around the world to visit.
I firmly believe we punch the heaviest in the world for that.
Oh,
what other country? And that's I hate this is off the point of whiskey, but I hate every year that there's some stupid article comes out. It's oh, it cost $5,000 to ship Micheál Martin to Japan. Yeah. You're like, yes, but he sat down with the Emperor of Japan. When else do we have that opportunity?
Exactly. And then it promotes Ireland. It's like, oh, there's someone here doing something. Oh, actually, it's St. Patrick's Day. You know what? I should get a bottle of something that's not Jameson, or obviously Jameson's good Irish brand, but it encourages people. Exactly, it encourages people to explore as well, and not just have, even outside the whiskey. I said Bord Bia. They do more than drink. They do food that's in their name, and like it is cool. Like in the States, I'm not sure if you were there when. Was it Kerrygold or taken over, or Dairy Kerrygold? Yeah, where it became the fancy butter for America, and it's just Irish butter. It's really good to see how
number 2 butter.
Yeah,
number 2 butter in the United States.
Yeah, and it's like we punch so much above our weight. It's always a little factoid I learned a couple of years ago was that there's more people employed in America by Irish multinationals than Irish people employed by American multinationals in Ireland. We like the Irish like food industry is massive around the world, and it's good to see how much we do push ourselves, and we do say, look, we're a small country, make small amounts of things, but what we do make, it's very good, and you should try it out.
You should. And Kerrygold is also, I'm pretty sure it's still a cooperative. I'm 99% sure it's still a cooperative or Nua. But yeah, I'll never get over that. Number 2 butter in the United States.
Yeah, well, we visited, because Rose is from America. We visited a few of her friends, and they broke out the fancy butter. And I was like, oh, it's Irish. Oh, it's Kerrygold. Could you get that?
I fucking brought that with me, like.
But it's the kind of thing where it's like, oh, because it is grass-fed, we're able to make things smaller scale, better, almost more artisan. Like, we don't think it's artisan, but on a massive scale, it is artisan. Like in Japan. I lived there for a few years, and the closest kind of, I suppose, environment they have to Ireland is this place called Hokkaido. It's up in the north, but the thing is, it's snowy for 6 months of the year. So they have a thing where Hokkaido butter and Hokkaido milk, and like, oh wow, it's really good, it's the best. It's about the same temperature, about the same latitude and everything as Ireland, just gets all the snow. So whereas we can produce milk and butter essentially kind of year round compared to them, they're limited to 6 months. So even though much bigger, much more kind of able to go much larger scale, we're able to just punch above our weight because just the environment and the willingness of industry bodies here to kind of promote ourselves.
Yeah, big time. I mean, we've great dairy. I also learned recently that we've one of the highest lactose tolerances in the world. Not intolerances, but tolerances.
Yeah.
Because we didn't have meat in our diet for so many years because we were dairy producing. You weren't eating the cows if they were producing milk. But then on the flip side of that, and I was talking to someone recently about this, this is completely off topic, but in terms of Irish food history, I was making some joke about, so I was always told growing up by my doctor, I love eating eggs, and Bord Bia promotes, I can hear, FSAI and Bord Bia promoting the eggs all the time. And I love eating, I probably eat 2 or 3 eggs per weekday morning. And the doctor would always say to me, she's like, be careful now. There's a very high iron count in eggs. Don't eat them more than 5 times a week because, particularly for men, are susceptible to hemochromatosis, too much iron. And we can't move it on and you'll get sick. And that's a very big problem. Don't do that. And I was talking to someone from the States and they were like, I don't think that's a thing. I was like, no, it's definitely, I was like, I've been told this by like 15 doctors.
Yeah.
That's like by many doctors that like iron levels is a really important thing. And I Googled it, and it's because we didn't eat meat and we overindexed Irish people while having this amazing lactose tolerance have like a biological need to hold on to iron. So that's the thing. That's a thing in Ireland.
No more. Because that is a thing. Like, to bring it a little bit back on topic, that's like if you're ever on the European continent, the rule about don't have a milky coffee in the afternoon is because they're mostly lactose intolerant. The more south you go, the more lactose intolerant you become, and so you can't have more than 1 milky coffee a day, and you have it in the morning. So that's why in Ireland we have, to bring it back to whiskey, the idea of an Irish coffee, just a bunch of cream on top, like not just milk, cream. And we'd have that in the evening. We'd have it whenever we want, So
after dinner.
After dinner, in the most sacrilegious time to have a milky, lactosey coffee to anyone on the European continent. Like, no, that's when we'll have it.
But I mean, even on that, you know, if someone said to me at like 11 p.m., they're like, "Hey, you want a coffee?" I'd be like, "No." They're like, "What if it's like a cappuccino?" I'd be like, "Where the hell would I want a coffee at 11? No, I obviously don't want a coffee at 11 o'clock. That's insane."
Yeah.
Go to a restaurant, you finish your meal at 11. They're like, "Irish coffees?" I'd be like, "Yes,
Yes.
one for everyone." Just
Yeah.
the whole
Instead of a dessert, I'll often have an Irish coffee. Yeah.
No, I'm not a dessert guy. I'm an Irish coffee guy. I will forego desserts.
Yeah.
Irish coffees, absolutely. But that's insane. Why at 11 o'clock on a Saturday? I'm not like, what?
It's got whiskey in it. It's all right. It's fine. It's a treat.
Cream, it's natural. Don't worry about it.
Like, have you had? Are you a fan of Irish creams? Speaking
Cream
of
liqueurs?
lactose, yeah, cream liqueurs. Yeah.
Yeah. Big time. Yeah.
Have you tried the new one from Two Sacks?
No, I haven't. I'm going to tell you a story. I was involved in I wasn't involved in the genesis, but I was involved in at the very beginning when they were trying to make that a thing. Yeah. They had the recipe that they wanted to use, and I was working for a company that they came to, and I was the person put on that. And they said, "We want to make a peated cream liqueur." And I was like, "Mate, I'll make it for you. That sounds fucking awful, but I will make it for you." And it is, I haven't tried the finished product, but I tried like Gen 1, Gen 2, and they were banging. And I was so happy to be wrong.
Like, I have a bottle over there. It's lovely. The peat, it's the same kind of, I think, blend as their, you know, the standard blend. So I think it's only 2% peated whiskey goes into it, but it's lovely. The smoke comes through a little bit, but it's not like smoky. It's more like, it's like liquid fudge. Comes through really well. Yeah, it's very nice. Yeah, I might have a sneaky sample, but I made an Irish coffee, and I tried pouring a little bit on that. It turned into like kind of like a Bailey's coffee style, but yeah, fantastic.
Yeah, well, top tip: I have made like 300 different variations of Irish coffees. If you put like a half measure into your cream before you whip it, instead of using it as the cream, you'll have more success, because the cream will kind of emulsify it, and then your cream will taste like the Irish cream. That's how you don't make a Bailey's style. But yeah, but a great place of where you can get the Two Stacks Irish cream, or any of the Irish whiskies we've been talking about tonight, is Irish Malts. They are based out of Cork. It is a brother enterprise. It's John Robert O'Donovan. They have a fantastic shop that will ship anywhere in the world that is legal. They are also the people behind 3 Drams. That is your subscription service to get and taste Irish whiskies all across the world. Once a month, 3 whiskies to your door. And if you aren't sick of listening to me talking, I am also the host of 3 Drams every month. But they'll be dropped to your door wherever you are in the world, where legal to do so, and you get to try new whiskies every month with the flavor makers and creators. So there's no better way, really. But a very big thank you to them, and Matt, to yourself as well, because we're winding down the show now. Yeah. But until the next episode, you have your Sailor's Home. I have my Garden County here. I'm going to throw it up more
empty
time.
Empty glass of Sailor's Home, unfortunately, but I might have to pour myself some more.
I was going to say, I think you have a bottle right in front of you, but that's okay. I'll say cilantro to you, and a very big thank you to everyone listening at home. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope you've enjoyed my jumper matching Matt's chair. That was unintentional. For those listening on podcast, they're both orange. That's basically it. Yeah. But a very big thank you to you. Very big thank you to Irish Malts, and this has been The Middle Cut with potstill.com.
Cilantro.